Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome back to Monster Hunter Wilds. Ever since Gamescom, we've been receiving a steady drip of new information for Monster Hunter Wilds, whether it is during events like the Tokyo Game Show or even during international interviews that kind of originated from Tokyo Game Show as far as I'm aware. There's definitely been tons of new information, new features, new mechanics that have been released into the public. And in today's video, I'm going to be breaking those down to the best of my ability, all of the new information that I've been collating over the last couple of weeks from different interviews, different shows, even some of the stuff that I brought back from Gamescom, just to kind of like have a centralized video where I talk about all of these things to also get us ready, because next week we are likely going to get some new information over at Paris Games Week. They have like this broadcast that they're doing that naturally I'm going to be broadcasting here in the channel as well. So if you're interested in Monster Hunter Wilds, one of the things that I would really appreciate is if you can hit the like button on this video, because it really helps me out. And if you want to know more, you can also hit subscribe, bell notification icon, and all of that stuff so that you're always notified whenever I put out a new video, and there's going to be naturally lots and lots of coverage for Monster Hunter Wilds. But having said that, let's get things started. Now, one of the things that the team has definitely been communicating in regards to Monster Hunter Wilds is that this game is going to have a bigger emphasis on storytelling. And I believe that since then, the actual first quest of the game has been posted online to places and whatnot, but I do remember that at Gamescom, I was not allowed to record that, so I'm not sure if that's something that the team intended or if it was something that was, you know, recorded and then released into the wild, so to speak. But basically, the stuff that I did watch from that first story quest, I was like, this is looking really good. This is something that I'm really going to be into. And they're also going to allow you to skip the cutscenes, even if it's the first time that you're watching it. So for those of you that, you don't want to experience the story all that much, you just want to go hunt monsters and make some cool sets, you're also going to be able to do that. But I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work in multiplayer, if there's even going to be like, multiplayer parts of the story, or if it's going to be completely separate. Right now, that's still information that I'm not entirely sure if we have it or not, but we'll see that moving forward. But let's just say that that is actually something that I'm personally interested in, because I did enjoy the story. I don't think that story has ever been the strongest point of Monster Hunter, but it will be interesting to see if the team actually dedicates enough to it to be like, no, this time it is actually going to be a big deal. We're actually going to do some proper writing in here. We're going to have like these crazy cutscenes. I'm very interested to see what the team comes up with. Now, in regards to the story itself, one of the things that came out from interviews was also that Elder Dragons are not going to be as big of a focus as they've been in previous game. Now, this doesn't mean that there's not going to be Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter Wilds, because obviously that is going to be the case. We've always had Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter games, at least as far as I can remember. Maybe not Monster Hunter 1, though. I'm not a big expert on Monster Hunter 1. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. But basically, they're not going to be as big of a focus. Now, this might seem strange because for a lot of people, they started Monster Hunter with Monster Hunter World, and the whole story of Monster Hunter World involves the Elder crossing from the old world into the new world, which naturally involves Elder Dragons left, right, and center. So there was a huge emphasis on Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter World. That is not going to be the case for Monster Hunter Wilds, which to me personally, I don't need Elder Dragons. As a matter of fact, some of the Elder Dragons that we end up fighting in World, like recently I've been fighting Fatalis and all of that stuff, and some of the Elder Dragons sometimes end up being like these very scripted fights where you have to either fight them in a very specific arena. Like you look at Fatalis. Fatalis, very memorable fight, but when you actually think about it, it's not really a hunt. It's just, it's a fight. You go into an arena and you fight Fatalis, and there's mechanics and all that stuff, which is cool. But the thing that I really like about Monster Hunter is hunting the monsters. So to me, them not focusing as much on Elder Dragons, that is actually a good thing, because it means that usually we'll be roaming the map doing crazy stuff, and that to me is pretty much a big plus. Now, another thing that is important for the story is they figured that it was time to voice our hunter in cutscenes. Up until this point, as far as I'm aware, the hunter has always been more of a silent protagonist, which is the character that we embody. And this time they're like, no, our hunter is going to speak. Now to me, I like it. I've always preferred voice protagonists over silent protagonists, but you guys let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about that. I do believe that the hunter is not something that you're going to be able to turn off, so the hunter is just going to speak, and that is what it is. But they also decided to voice the Palico. Now, we've always been able to understand Palicos, even though basically they communicate in in the other games through like meows and stuff like that. But if you don't want to listen to the palette code, then don't worry about it, because that is actually one of the features that you can turn off. This has been confirmed. You can just go into the settings, turn that stuff off, and then your palette code will just do meows and you'll see like text on screen. Me personally, I'm going to have that stuff on all the time, but to each their own, and I appreciate the fact that the team is at the very least giving people choices. Now, one of the first really big features that I feel like we need to talk about is going to be seamless locales. So locales, or maps, depending on how you prefer to refer to them, in Monster Hunter have always been like the places where you go and you hunt. Now, in the very beginnings, like in the old games, we used to have these maps segregated into different zones, and then you would navigate through the zones and there would be like a loading screen in between. Monster Hunter World changed that, and we now had a seamless locale. So like you would have the Ancient Forest, or the Wildspire Wastes, or the Elder's Recess, or whatever other zone you want to talk about. This would just be like one big map where you would hunt the monster, but these maps would be isolated. You wouldn't really travel from one map to another. You would have like a loading screen, and then you could kind of like travel, even though you could, technically speaking, kind of see them. Particularly, you could see the Wildspire Wastes from the Ancient Forest, which was cool because, it adds to immersion, the fact that you can see the other map in the distance and all of that stuff. But this time around, it seems like you are actually going to be able to seamlessly traverse through locales. The example that we've seen is the Windward Plains, and the players will actually traverse from the Windward Plains to the Scarlet Forest seamlessly. There's like this little passage, you go in there, and you go through like this corridor type thing where you can even be collecting, materials and stuff like that as you are roaming through, and then you will find yourself on the Scarlet Forest. Now, it is important to mention that just because there are going to be seamless locales, it does not mean that the whole game is going to be seamless, because there might be locales that are really far away, and maybe you'll need to take an airship to get there, or even just a traditional ship to get there. And I think that is probably going to be the case. I don't think you're going to be seamlessly traveling through all of the different locales. I think that some of them are going to be too far away. We shall see how things pan out, but that is the information that we have right now. Now, these maps are actually really, really big. They're bigger than the locales that we've had in Monster Hunter World, at least from my interpretation, from what I've seen of them so far. They also feature a certain degree of verticality and all that stuff, but in order to help you navigate through those maps, you're going to have a brand new mount called the Sacred, which is this bird raptor looking creature. Now, Sacred is going to help you navigate through the map. He has a couple of features, like he automatically dodges monsters whenever you're on autopilot, because you can set Sacred to be autopilot. You can mark a location on the map, Sacred will take you there, but you can also take over and manually control Sacred, so it's going to be better than like the Raider rides that we've had in Monster Hunter World Iceborne, which you could call in a Raider ride and it would take you to a certain location map. This time you'll actually be able to fully control the mount. It has an auto-dodging system, which I know is something that I was personally conflicted with in the beginning, but from what I've experienced by playing the game at Gamescom, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, and I actually don't think it's going to work if a monster is fast enough. The Sacred is also customizable. You can change its colors, as well as there's going to be cosmetic equipment, which has been confirmed because the Deluxe Edition includes special items to customize your Sacred, and I would expect us to also get some of those items through event quests. At least I hope that's the case, because obviously I know that Capcom's probably going to do some cosmetic DLC that people will have to buy, because that's just something that they've done with a lot of Monster Hunter games. But I'm hoping that we'll also be able to earn a significant chunk of that through event quests. I only think that is fair, but we shall see how things pan out. Another thing is, while you're on Sacred, you're also able to collect materials. You're going to be using the Hook Slinger, which I'll talk about more a little bit further in the video, but you can just use your Hook Slinger to kind of like collect stuff as you are going through. You can collect mushrooms and all types of different materials. I'm assuming you have to dismount in order to collect stuff like minerals. You have to actually mine those out, but some of the more basic stuff you'll be able to use your Slinger to just pick up from range. Another thing is, while you are riding Sacred, you'll also be able to use items. So you'll be able to heal yourself, you will be able to sharpen your weapon, and you will be able to like eat food, and pretty much any item that you can use while you're off Sacred, you're also going to be able to use it on Sacred. Sacred will also be the way in which you'll be able to swap weapons. I'll talk more about 2-weapon mechanics a little bit further ahead when you get into combat mechanics and whatnot, but just be aware that you'll be able to carry 2 weapons into the field, and mounting Sacred allows you to switch between them. Sacred also gets some deliverables delivered to him throughout quests and stuff like that, which I'll talk a little bit more a little bit further ahead in the video, but just be aware Sacred is going to be a big deal. Sacred is actually one of the criticisms that I have of Monster Hunter Wilds, because I feel like even if you're able to mount Sacred, I feel like you shouldn't be able to sharpen midway through combat. Now, I understand a lot of people don't like this point of view. This is the way that I feel. It is what it is. It's not really going to ruin the experience for me one way or the other, but personally I would prefer it if you weren't able to sharpen during combat. And even if you're going to be able to like heal yourself and eat food during combat on top of Sacred, I feel like there should be a little bit of a hindrance aspect to it, or at least I hope that monsters are able to punish you for just, oh, let me just call Sacred whenever I feel like running laps around the monster, because Sacred is really fast to the point where I could run laps around a Doshiguma, for instance, and Doshiguma would never catch up to me. There would be no danger whatsoever. And that is one of the things that I'm like, no, there needs to be a certain element of danger, but we'll see how all of this stuff pans out in the final game. I think that there will be some mechanics to offset this, but for now we just don't know enough about it. Now, another mechanic that they're going to be implementing into Monster Hunter Wilds is seamless hunting. So what does this mean? After you complete a quest, you don't have to leave. You don't have to go back to the hub. You don't have to go back to... Pretty much everything works kind of like an expedition, it seems like. So you can choose to go back to the hub after you complete a quest. That is an option that you have. But you don't have to. You can just keep hunting. As a matter of fact, there's this little thing that you have on your hunter's note, which is like a hunting... like a schedule of everything that is happening on the map. It tells you, oh, when there's going to be an upsurge in a certain thing. How long is this particular monster going to be in the map for? What is the weather going to be like? Because we also have the different type of weather systems and all that stuff that we'll talk about. So there's this very detailed mapping of events that are going to be taking place on the field, and you can kind of like plan your hunts out that way. It even tells you the rewards that you can get for different types of monsters, which is pretty cool. Now, with this seamless hunting style come new ways of starting quests. One of the things that a lot of players will have seen if you've been watching gameplay from Monster Hunter Wilds is that a lot of the quests you can now just start by attacking the monster. You go up to the monster, you hit him like a couple of times, and eventually the quest will start. But that's not the only way to do it. You can also start quests out in the field by using your map. You can just pop up a map and you'll see the monsters and you'll see the quests are available to you. You can start a quest that way, or you can still do it the traditional way where you can be at the hub and you can use the counter and you can start your quest that way if that is something that you prefer. Basically, they're increasing the flexibility of when and how you can start a quest, which in a way is a good thing, because if you were to go on an expedition and kill a monster, you won't necessarily get the best amount of rewards for it in Monster Hunter World, whereas in Monster Hunter Wilds, if you just start attacking the monster, boom, quest starts. Now, there are certain limitations when it comes to this. So say, for instance, you start attacking another monster, let's say you attack a Chattacabra, but then you initiate the Chattacabra quest, but then you start attacking a Doshiguma as well. You're still on the Chattacabra quest, so even if you kill the Doshiguma, sure, you'll get some rewards from part breaks and stuff like that, but you're not really going to get specific Doshiguma rewards. So keep that in mind. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to be handling multi-monster quests. That is something that we still don't know, but you can also start a Chattacabra quest, then beat the Doshiguma to an inch of his health, kill the Chattacabra, and then start a new quest on the Doshiguma and still get full rewards for attacking him. Just make sure to watch like the whole forecast of events for the map, and that Doshiguma is going to be there long enough for you to take advantage of that. Now, with Monster Hunter Wilds, we also have a new weather system, and we've seen that the weather system is going to be different depending on the locale. So, for instance, when it comes to the Windward Plains, the weather system usually starts in fallow, which is like this kind of like darker mood of the environment where everything is just kind of like, it's almost like the neutral stage where everything is in. There's not that many resources around, but it's not too hostile yet. And then it progresses into the inclemency period, which in the Windward Plains, it's like when the lightning starts dropping down and everything gets completely crazy. And then after that, you go into the Season of Plenty, where everything is just like, oh, it looks like paradise on Earth. And this seems to be the 3 states that every map is going to be in. So Scarlet Forest in the fallow period, that's when the water is red. So everything is kind of like stagnant and stasis, and everything's just like pretty chill. But I believe that during those times, Lalabarina is going to be a little bit more powerful. And then eventually you go into the inclemency period, which in the Scarlet Forest is just a massive flood of water, massive rains, and all of that stuff, which washes away the sediment and the red substance that is in the water. And then eventually that transitions into the Plenty period, which basically everything just looks like paradise on Earth. And it seems like every locale that we go into is going to follow this kind of like weather system, but we still don't have a particularly clear idea of how it works in terms of how long it stays on each of these things, because a lot of the stuff that we've seen right now has been from demos, which are naturally staged in a way to showcase the game. So those periods might be a little bit sped up. I would imagine that in the final version of the game, you're not going to be watching the weather changing quite as drastically as we've seen, but again, we will see. All that stuff pans out. Just be aware that there's going to be this weather system, and this weather system is also going to influence monster behavior as well as even resources that are available in the map, and some of the tougher monsters will roam around during inclemency and stuff like that. And I would imagine that certain quests will have you face certain monsters during certain weather periods where they might be at their strongest. Like, for instance, fighting a Raidao during inclemency kind of like makes a lot of sense. So we'll see if that is going to be the case or not. Now, since we've been talking about locales and weather systems and all that stuff, I figured that this would be an adequate time to also bring up pop-up camps. So the way that pop-up camps are going to be working this time around is you are going to be able to place a limited number of camps in the map. I don't think you're going to be able to cover every single location of the map, so different players will probably find like, oh, usually I like fighting around here, so I'll just put a pop-up camp here. Now, the thing is, pop-up camps can also be destroyed. There's going to be apparently 3 types of locations, which is type number 1 will be absolutely safe locations, and these locations, like your camp, is not going to get destroyed at all. Then there's type number 2, which is locations that your camp won't be destroyed unless you lure a monster there. So these are locations where your camp is mostly going to be safe unless you make a mistake and now there's a monster there who's going to crush your camp. And then there's going to be the 3rd type, which is very dangerous places where monsters will pass by and they will destroy your camp. Whenever monsters come upon a camp, the natural thing that happens is that they're going to destroy your camp, and if they destroy your camp, you have to deploy it again, and that costs you points. Points as in it, those of you who've played Monster Hunter before, there's usually 2 types of game currencies that you have in Monster Hunter, and I'm not talking about real life currencies, we're talking about just strictly game currencies, which you have your Zenny, which is kind of like your money, and then you have your points. And points are usually used for certain things. These are your guild points, so you usually have to take certain actions to earn points, and as you earn points, you're able to do things with the guild, and some of those things are going to be your pop-up camps and all of that good stuff. So now let's talk about some of the gameplay mechanics that are involved whenever you go out hunting and do combat and all of that good stuff. And one of the ones that I would consider to be really important is the fact that for Monster Hunter Wilds, you're going to be having 2 weapons available to you at any given time. Now, this is something that you kind of already can do in Monster Hunter World Iceborne as well as Rise Sunbreak, because you can basically set up loadouts and then you can go back to your tent, and at any point in time you can swap to a different loadout and you can continue hunting with a different weapon. But this time it's going to be a little bit more dynamic, because all you have to do to change weapons is you need to call in your Sacred. You mount the Sacred, you press D-pad right, if I'm not mistaken, and it will just straight up swap out to a second weapon, which is much faster than actually leaving the field using a Farcaster or running away from the monster or anything. Like, it is intended for you to potentially swap between 2 weapons. Now, it's also important to say that a lot of people have been concerned about this, like, oh, so does that mean I need to learn 2 weapons? Like, how does this work? Which weapon combinations can I have? And you can have any combination of weapons that you want. Like if you want to have 2 of the same weapon, you can also do that. Or you can not even use the feature. I don't think that this will be a mandatory feature, but it is definitely something that Capcom can weigh and then decide like, hey, you know, we can make this monster a little bit tougher between these 2 phases because players can swap 2 different weapons. Maybe. I'm not exactly sure what their plan is going to be with that, but the fact is you're going to be able to bring 2 weapons into the field. You might want to bring 2 weapons of the same type with different ailments or with different elements, or you might want to actually bring 2 completely different weapons. Some of the things that I'm considering would be either Gun Lance and Charge Blade, because these are 2 weapons I really like to play, or Gun Lance and Sword and Shield, again, 2 weapons I like to play, or maybe even Gun Lance and Lance, which, you know, I like weapons with shields, all right? Shields up, iron breakers, all of that good stuff. I'm very one-tracked when it comes to this. But another thing that might just happen is I just might bring 2 gun lances, okay? Maybe I'll be like, you know, I want to have the option to use wide shelling, and I want to have the option to use normal shelling. So gun lances will actually really benefit from this system because shelling playstyles are completely different, and sometimes we like having different shelling styles. And I personally think that will be really awesome, or even just having, like, different elements. Like a really good use case for this, and some of you might be surprised, would be, let's say for instance, hunting Baroth. Now you don't really need to optimize that much for hunting Baroth, but if you were optimizing, when Baroth is covered in mud, he is weakest to water. So you use the water element to clean up the mud. When he doesn't have mud, I forget what is the element. It's either snow or fire. I'm sorry, I forget. But either way, basically you can then swap to a different element and you will take more damage. So this is a really cool thing that I feel like they can incorporate into a lot of monsters where you have like these dual elemental type things and you can be swapping between weapons. And, you know, this is just a little playful thing that you can kind of do with it. But one of the things that a lot of you guys are going to be like is, well, but wait a minute, if you have 2 weapons, how exactly is the build going to work? Because, you know, you make a build for a charge blade, that's going to be a very different build if you're playing, like, say, with a longsword. These are extremely different builds, also depending on the type of charge blade that it is. Because if it is an impact file charge blade, the skills are going to be different than if it is an elemental type charge blade, for instance, okay? And the way that they're handling this is, according to developers, and this is not something that has been super well explained up until this point through translations and interviews and all of this stuff, but the developers have stated that, okay, so this time around, the way that things are going to work is the weapons themselves are going to contain whatever they're calling the offensive skills. So this hasn't really been set in stone, so some people will think offensive skills and they might think like, oh, you mean like attack up, critical eye. Maybe that is what they're talking about because those definitely sound like offensive skills. But it could also be things like focus, because if you think about a greatsword, focus is most definitely an offensive skill because it lets you charge faster, deal more damage faster. If you're talking about the gun lance, magazine, that's an offensive skill. Artillery, that's an offensive skill. So we're still not entirely sure what offensive skills mean. And then there's another thing that has been happening, which is the developers have also stated they're doing a major overhaul to the skill system of the game, which makes sense. And personally, I'm super excited about it because one of the things that we have seen is that the community has pretty much constantly relied on, okay, we're going to use weakness exploit, critical boost, agitator, attack boost. You guys know, the usual suspects. This is something that we always end up using by the time we get to endgame, and it's like, I'm be real, as somebody that likes doing all kinds of different builds, those skills are boring. It's a flat increase to your damage. Woohoo! Doesn't really change much about the way that you play the game, just makes the number go up. I find skills like focus, evade extender, bubbly dance combined with like crisis, or even some of the stuff that we had in Sunbreak, like with what was it called, like the bloodlust thing, that was kind of cool. And there's a bunch of other more interesting skills that actually change the way in which you play the game that are far more interesting than say, oh yes, I can't wait to get attack up 7 and Wix and Wex and critical boost and all the, you know, these are just, it's just, okay, number go up, great. I want things that actually make me play in a different way. That to me is more different. And I think that this is one of the things that I'm hoping that developers are going to overhaul. Now, another thing that we've come to know through the Tokyo Game Show gameplay, because they showed the map and they showed the rewards for quests, is that potentially in Monster Hunter Wilds, we're going to be seeing the return of RNG decorations. I've even did a video talking about why personally I prefer RNG decorations over RNG charms, but I'm not here to convince you of one thing or the other. You choose whatever you want, but it just seems like RNG decorations are going to be in the cards because they were listed as additional rewards to some of the quests that we've done. But again, keep in mind, when talking about RNG decorations, because I've seen a lot of people basically get all doom and gloom when we're talking about RNG decorations, you have to think about RNG decorations as they were in the final patch of Iceborne, because that is the basis that we are going to be working from when it comes to Wilds, because Capcom did the changes that they did in Iceborne because they felt the need to do so. So this is a place where you can meld things like Bow Charge Plus. You can just straight up meld that decoration in Iceborne. You don't have to get it through RNG. You can just meld it because that is a very important decoration. Another example, Guard Up. You can just meld that decoration. You don't need to get it through RNG. So this is something that Capcom probably acknowledges, like, okay, there's a couple of decorations that we've had in the past that are extremely crucial to certain builds. We can't have those be RNG because they're just too important. Shaver decoration for a Clutch Claw boost. That's another one that you can just straight up craft. You don't have to get it through RNG. But then there's another thing, which is with this change that they've done, some of the icons that we've seen in this Tokyo Game Show gameplay show a sword icon on the top right-hand side of the decoration. This to me symbolizes like that is what they're considering an offensive decoration. And again, this is a little bit of speculation on my part, but I think it makes sense. That is what they would consider an offensive decoration that will get slotted onto your weapon. So then you can choose when you are doing quests, do I want to go do a quest that has more decoration rewards that are offensive or that are utility, so that you can kind of like target skills a little bit more accurately. And to me, that is going to make a massive difference into how we play the game. But also on top of that, the overall that they're going to be doing, where they're going to be changing the way that a lot of the skills in the system work, I think is going to be a massive boon for Monster Hunter Wilds. And we'll see how that pans out. Personally, I'm super optimistic when it comes to this type of stuff, but you guys let me know how you feel about it in the comment section down below. Now, when it comes to set bonuses, this is something that we've had in previous games. This is something that we're also going to be having in Monster Hunter Wilds. But we're not just going to have set bonuses, we're also going to have group bonuses, which is really, really interesting. Now, group bonuses is a bonus ability that you get from mix and matching certain armor pieces that share certain traits. So an example that I would give that might be something that gets implemented into the game would be, for instance, let's say you have the Rathalos armor and the Rathian armor. These are both, from the Wrath family, so to speak, and you might be able to mix and match pieces of Rathalos armor with Rathian armor to get specific bonuses, which is pretty cool because it gives you more flexibility in your mixed sets without necessarily forcing you to abandon getting set bonuses that you might want. Personally, this is something I'm really excited about because you guys know me. I love doing builds. I love creating mixed sets. So this is definitely going to be something that I'm going to be experimenting with, and it is a feature that I'm very, very excited for. Now, further ahead, we also have the Hook Slinger making a return. Now, this is something that we've already had in Monster Hunter World. I'm sure you guys played with the Hook Slinger a significant bit. Now, one of the concerns that people have when it comes to this, like, oh, but what about the Clutch Claw? Is the Clutch Claw making a comeback? And let me tell you, I'm not a fan of the Clutch Claw. And the more I've been playing in my return to World, the more I've been playing Iceborne, the more I'm like, bro, I really don't like the Clutch Claw. I don't like it at all. This is something that bothered me a little bit the first time that I played through Iceborne. Second time playing through Iceborne, I can safely say I absolutely hate the Clutch Claw. I don't like it at all. And from what we've seen so far, it does not seem that the Clutch Claw is making a comeback at all. You have Hook Slinger, it allows you to grab stuff from a distance. It allows you to perform certain actions, but it does not allow you to clutch onto the monster. Now, there are certain attacks, like the Greatsword has like this follow-up attack that you can do, where they kind of use the Hook Slinger to to basically show momentum in animations, but it is not like an active mechanic like, oh, we gotta wound and clutch claw and do all of these things, okay? Now, the hook slinger can also be used to trigger traps. There are going to be traps just like we've had in Monster Hunter World. You know, I'm talking about endemic traps that are out on the map. You'll be able to like trigger rocks falling, stuff like that. And there's also endemic interactions with other monsters that I thought were really cool. Like in the Tokyo Gameplay showcase, they showed the Chemitrice, and they take her to this section where there's a couple of more small monsters that apparently are in direct competition with the Chemitrice because they both forage and scavenge for carrion, which is just like the corpses of other dead creatures. And because they are rivals in a way in the ecosystem, they attack each other. So the Chemitrice approaches them because you lure them there, and the small monsters jump on the Chemitrice and it triggers it down, which is pretty cool. The Capcom team has also stated it's not always going to be like that. Sometimes the Chemitrice might come out on top and the little monsters might end up running away. But either way, it's cool to see these little interactions, and I think it's pretty nice. Now, another important mechanic that we have is sneak attacks. So you're going to be able to sneak up on monsters before they see you for the first time, and you're going to be able to deliver a special attack that deals added damage. But this is not, according to the team, again, this is not going to be something that you're going to be like, oh, smoke bomb or ghillie mantle, sneak attack, and then smoke bomb or ghillie mantle and sneak attack again. This is going to be something that you're going to be doing like once per hunt. Now, there have been some situations that have been weird, particularly one that was in, I think it was at PAX. There was some gameplay shown from Joe Bustos, one of the CMs, and it was weird because he engaged the monster, and then midway through the fight, he was able to do a sneak attack, and that was kind of weird, but I don't think that's intentional. But yeah, sneak attacks are going to be a thing. Every weapon is going to have a unique sneak attack to them, and I think these are mostly going to be, you know, good overall openers for you. The other thing is we have naturally focus mode, which is something that a lot of people are concerned with. So let's talk a little bit more about it. Focus mode is basically left trigger on your controller. It is basically aiming. You're going to be able to aim a little bit better. You're going to be able to position yourself a little bit better by just refocusing your camera and making your character face a certain way. Now, focus mode also shows you if you've gotten any wounds on a monster, and it is needed in order to perform focus strikes. But it is not something like, oh, let me go into my focus mode stance. It's like you can very easily just tap L2 and R1 and boom, that's your focus strike right there. You don't have to be like, oh, I have to go into this lengthy focus mode animation. This is annoying. No. Using focus mode, I would say, is almost optional except for focus strikes, but I feel like most of the people that enjoy engaging with Monster Hunter combat, focus mode is going to be something that you'll want to learn and take advantage of. Focus mode is what allows you to completely change the direction of your true charge slash. Like you're talking like straight up 180 true charge slash. You can do a 180 turn midway through a true charge slash and still land it, which I'm sure a lot of greatsword users will love because they can fail in even more epic ways. Isn't that right, Josh? Those great sword whiffs are never gonna get old, baby. It is what it is. No, but you guys get the point, right? Now, an interesting thing is there is a weapon that benefits a little bit more from focus mode, and that is the insect glaive, because focus mode actually enables you to use attacks that will throw out your kinsect, and your kinsect will attack the monster and also collect, you know, I forget what the name of it is, the essences or whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. You'll be able to collect those and get your buffs that way as well, which is pretty cool. Now, when it comes to wounds, there was a misconception early on that you were going to have to go into focus mode in order to generate wounds. That is not the case, okay? You can just attack a monster and that will generate wounds, and you don't even need focus mode to see the wounds. You can see the wounds physically in the monster when you cause them. Now, the thing is, focus mode will make it more obvious, and certain monsters, you know, they might have furs, or maybe they're, you know, the texture of their skin or their scales or whatever. Maybe it's not as obvious when a wound is there, but it is there. That is the intent. You'll be able to see the wound, so you don't have to use focus mode to see the wound. But if you use focus mode, it'll glow red and you'll know, there's a wound over there. And then you can go in and you can do your focus strike. When you do a focus strike, which like I said is basically L2 plus R1 on your controller, whenever you do a focus strike, you have to hit your focus strike on the wound location. If you don't, then your focus strike is not going to really deal as much damage as it should. But that's how you get focus mode, wounds, focus strike. Now, this will also allow you to break parts, even though I've been told that it's not directly linked. But whenever I was playing the game, whenever I broke a wound, it seemed that I also broke a part. But I guess that's mostly because of the amount of damage that you will deal when you break a wound. But whenever you break parts, you're automatically also going to get the material. There's not going to be any more picking up shinies from the ground, and thank God for that. And I know that a lot of people will be like, oh, I thought Rurikhan was all anti-convenience and stuff. Yeah, I'm anti-convenience in things that matter, things that actually change your gameplay, things where you actually have to make an active choice to, like, say, sharpen your weapon, eat a meal, drink a potion. These should all be tactical choices. But like, oh, I have to pick up this shiny thing from the ground, otherwise it's going to disappear. These are not things that add to the immersion for me. These, because at the end of the hunt, the thing would still be there in a realistic way of speaking. It doesn't just disappear into the ether. So the fact that you just pick up shinies, to me, that's good, because a lot of the times people would get killed picking up shinies. And I don't really think that that's a tactical decision. That's more like, no, I need that material and I'm going to make a poor tactical decision to pick up this material, right? I don't know. That's the way that I look at it. You guys let me know how you feel about it. But yeah, breaking parts automatic grants you the materials. There are still shinies, but they're a little bit weird. So apparently if you take monsters to certain places and they pound the ground, like coins will come up from the ground. We see this in some of the gameplay footage. So there are still shinies, but they're no longer like monster materials from what I can tell. And you can use your hook slinger to pick up these shinies, which is interesting. Now, we also have a new mounting attack system. So mounting this time around is going to be more in line with what you've seen in Monster Hunter World. So it is not going to be like what you've seen in Rise with wyvern riding and all that stuff, which, wyvern riding was fun a couple of times, but after a while, wyvern riding is just straight up overpowered as far as I'm concerned. Like, you see another monster roam into the air and you're like, yes, this is going to be great for me. Whereas I feel like the vibe should be, oh no, there's another monster here. This is a problem, right? But anyways, new mounting system. You're going to have like quick attacks. Then you're going to have strong attacks. These are all going to be using your carving knife. And then you're going to have weapon attacks. So you can straight up pull out your weapon and do an attack on top of the monster. So with the gun lance, this is like a shell. You basically shell into the monster, which is pretty cool. I'm not exactly sure how, these things are going to work in conjunction with one another. Like, when should you use light attacks versus when you should use heavy attacks versus when you should use your weapon. But ultimately, the point is you attack the monster to create a wound. You're going to be creating a wound while you're mounting, and then after you create that wound, you're going to do a focus strike to finish the mount. And that is kind of like how you finish the mount. At least that's what I've gotten from the system so far, and it is pretty cool. It's pretty much in line with what you've expected from World, except now it utilizes the wounding system. So you're going to hit it, create a wound, and then bust that wound with a focus strike. That's how mounting works now. So when it comes to sharpness and sharpening, these are going to be a couple of things that are going to be changing. So first of all, your sharpness gauge is going to be bigger depending on the sharpness that you're at. So the blue sharpness is going to be bigger than green sharpness, and I'm assuming white sharpness is going to be bigger than blue sharpness, so on and so forth. You guys get the idea. The gauge is bigger. The gauge is going to have an indicator as to at which point it is going to level down to the previous sharpness. So you'll see an indicator on screen of when that is happening. And the other very important thing is when you are sharpening your weapon, whereas in previous games you would have to go through the full sharpening cycle to get any benefit, which is usually 4 swipes unless you're using skills. So you'll have to go like, okay, sharpen 1, sharpen 2, sharpen 3, sharpen 4. Then your hunter will put his weapon in the air and go like shing, and then your weapon is sharpened, right? This time around, it's going to be different. Every swipe counts towards the sharpness. So if you are interrupted midway through sharpening, but you got like 1 or 2 swipes off, that means that your weapon is a little bit sharper. You're not going to get the full, effect, the full sharpen, right? But you are going to get it a little bit more, which is, in my opinion, a cool thing because it's more realistic, it's more immersive, it makes sense because your hunter is taking the time to sharpen his weapon. Even if he doesn't finish the job, it would be expected that he's done something and the weapon is now a little bit sharper. That makes sense. But at the same time, it also goes back to the whole sacred thing that we talked about. I still wish, particularly with these improvements, it just seems to make even less sense that they would let you just sharpen from the comfort of your sacred while in combat. I'm not against you sharpening on sacred while you are moving from one point in the map to another. I'm against you sharpening on sacred when you're in combat, but completely different discussion, all of that stuff. So there's also some changes when it comes to bows and bow guns. Now, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to ranged weapons, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, but bows, you're just not going to craft coatings anymore, is my understanding. You will get coatings back by doing perfect dodges and other actions that you can perform with the bow, which is pretty cool. And the bow guns, they're going to have certain ammo types that are going to be infinite. So the type of ammunition that the gun specializes in, for instance, like say piercing rounds, those might be infinite, and they will also scale depending on the type of rounds that weapon shoots. So instead of a weapon shooting, say, Pierce 1, Pierce 2, and Pierce 3, it is likely going to be that, let's say your weapon is Pierce 2. Pierce 2 is just infinite ammo, and you just fire Pierce 2s. That's my understanding. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure that plenty of more people are doing analysis on the ranged weapons because I'm not an expert when it comes to that stuff. Another thing, mantles are making a return. The only mantle we've seen so far is the ghillie mantle. My suspicion is that this time we're going to be using mantles for specific actions. So it's not going to be the case where like, oh, I'm just going to use this fireproof mantle for, I don't know, a couple of minutes during the fight or something like that. I think the point is going to be you're going to get a mantle, you're going to perform an action, and then the mantle is going to come off. I don't know why I have this suspicion, but again, speculation, but we are getting mantles for sure. But I hope that Capcom remembers that a lot of people spend a lot of time working on the fashion of their hunters, and they're not looking forward to looking at their fashion be desecrated by having a mantle on top of it. Now, getting back to some more generalistic stuff, we have the fact that dead monsters will now generate their own bone mounds. Now, bone mounds are still going to be in static locations throughout the map, and I say static, they're probably going to be somewhat dynamic, but, you'll still have places where bone mounds will spawn, but if you kill a monster, it will eventually generate a bone mound. I'm assuming that there might go through a process where it either rots away or some other monster comes and picks at its carcass, but it will eventually generate a bone mound there, which is pretty cool. Another thing, supplies will get delivered on the field. Usually you see this happen whenever you start a new quest. So say you're seamlessly going through the world and you start a brand new quest, you might get supplies delivered. The way that this works is Alma actually places the supplies on your sacred. So if you want to have access to them, you got to call out your sacred, go into your sacred, and then you can press left on D-pad and you'll have access to whatever was delivered to you, and then you can transfer all of that stuff over to your main bag. You're still going to be able to capture endemic life. I've actually captured something right at the tail end of my demo. It works just like it works in Monster Hunter World. You have like your little capture net, you throw it out, capture endemic life, and I'm assuming you'll be able to let them loose in some personal location, like a room of some description that your hunter will have. We'll see how that stuff pans out. Another important thing is while you're out in the field, you no longer need to gather tracks for investigations or even for learning information about the monsters or any of that stuff. The developer is saying you don't have to do that anymore, although there might be some mistranslations there, but you can still get materials from gathering those tracks. One of the examples that we see is whenever they go up to the Kemet trees and there's like this scale thing on the ground and the scout flies, point towards it, you go there, pick it up, and you actually get that scale as a material. There's new food mechanics where you're going to be able to select 3 ingredients and you actually see those ingredients being cooked, and different ingredients will give you different buffs and all of that stuff. There's also a BBQ thing where you're going to be able to cook different types of meats and stuff like that as well. And another interesting thing about food is that this time around, well done steaks will increase your health as well as your stamina, which is a good thing because most of the time in the recent Monster Hunter games, we would rather use rations because rations are faster and they get the same job done as the well-done steaks, so most people wouldn't really use well-done steaks all that much. So it's nice to see well-done steaks coming back into the fold, although it does make you question, okay, so I guess max potions are just for healing now because we used to use the max potions to get the max health if we weren't at max health. But it's good to see well-done steaks get a little bit more utility. This, I think, is a big win, so, you know, it is what it is. Now, I spoke earlier about the forecast of monsters and all that stuff. There's also a new monster ranking system wherein it tells you the strength of the monster that is out in the field. So you might have a Chattacabra that's like 2 pips of strength, and you have another Chattacabra that is 4 pips of strength. Like I've said multiple times, my hope is that the 4 pips Chattacabra would actually be a challenger, will beat the crap out of you, and it will also give you better rewards because this allows the game to basically satisfy both newcomers to the franchise as well as veterans to the franchise that actually want to get a decent challenge at low rank and high rank as opposed to just walking around raffle stomping the whole game. This to me is a big win, and I hope that that's how it works. And naturally, they also show you based on the strength of the monster, you're going to get increased rewards. The examples that we saw showed different types of decorations that you would get based on which monsters you were fighting. That's pretty cool. Another thing that I probably should have talked about this earlier in the video, but herd monsters are going to be a thing. These are monsters that herd together and they will basically fight as a unit, but you're able to separate them using things like the large dung bomb, which is basically the poop nuke. Okay? You just throw a big wad of poop at monsters and there's like a mushroom cloud of poop and they all run away. Now, this is something that I would never really do in a realistic scenario because why would a hunter carry poop in their backpack? This just doesn't seem reasonable to me. But, you know, to each their own. There are other ways to separate monsters using traps, either, you know, endemic traps that you'll find throughout the world, or even like you can take a pack of Doshagumas to a pack of Balaharas, and then the Balahara will ambush it with their sand trap and all that stuff, and the only monster that comes out is going to be the Alpha Doshaguma. The other thing is you can also use luring pods to lure monsters to different places and whatnot, and you might be able to spread packs out that way, or you can just fight the whole pack if that's something that you want to do. Either way, I think that herd monsters sounds pretty cool. We shall see how all of that stuff pans out. Then finally, we also have paintballs making a return, but they pretty much work as a pinging system. So you're not going to shoot monsters with paintball. You're going to use paintballs to mark locations in the map visually so that your teammates can see, oh, he's marking this thing. We should either bring the monster here or whatever, which I think is a cool thing because, you know, you'll actually visually mark things like, hey, there's a trap over here, and you shoot a paintball at it, and people will be like, oh yeah, we should bring the monster over there for the trap. That's cool. And talking about people and multiplayer, there is going to be an SOS signal system, just like we've had in previous Monster Hunter games. And when you shoot out an SOS, it will try to get other players to come and join you. Or if you're playing solo, you'll get NPC support hunters to come and join you. And one of the questions that I've had for the longest time is, do these NPC hunters scale the monster's hit points? Because that's how it works in multiplayer. You bring in more players, monster gets more health and increases different thresholds like stun, mounting thresholds, and all that good stuff, right? How does it work when you bring in NPC hunters? Because the way that companions worked in Rise and Sunbreak is it didn't actually scale the monster's health. In Wilds, it will. The NPC hunters will scale the monster's health, but they won't count towards carts. So if a hunter is downed, they don't count towards your cart total. So you're still just dependent on yourself, but you have the other hunters helping you out. I'm assuming that the hunters are not going to be quite as effective as other players, but they will give you that sense of like, oh no, I'm hunting with a party of, other people, which is cool. Even if you're playing solo for whatever reason it happens to be. Okay, so I think that is a good thing. I'm happy that NPC hunters will scale monsters' HP. I think that makes sense. And finally, we've gotten confirmation that we are getting 16-player lobbies back. And not just that, but there's apparently going to be some kind of party system where you're going to be able to be in a party with other players, but at the same time, you're going to be doing like your own single player quest. And at any point, the other player's going to go, hey, I need help to hunt this monster, and you can stop what you're doing and go help them. But it almost reminds me a little bit of what it was like back in the day, partying up in an MMORPG, and then somebody would ask for your help, and you'd be doing like your own quests, but then you would stop what you're doing, go help, and then you go back and you do your own thing later. But I like the fact that they're paying attention to that and making multiplayer more flexible. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But this video is already way longer than I had planned for. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys learned something. And like I said at the start, if I missed anything, let me know in the comment section down below. For now, this is going to be it. If you guys enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that jazz. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.